Nigeria's oil story is both a blessing and a curse. The country struck oil in commercial quantities in 1956, and by the 1970s, crude oil had become the backbone of the economy of the country. But with oil wealth came a new problem, which was how to make petrol affordable for ordinary Nigerians. That was the birth of the subsidy era. In the late 1970s, following the oil boom under General Olusegun Obasanjo's military administration, subsidy was introduced. The logic was simple. Since Nigeria was an oil-producing nation, its citizens should not suffer high cost of petrol. So the government decided to pay the difference between the international price of refined fuel and the price Nigerians had to buy fuel at the pump. At first, it looked noble. Petrol was cheap. Transport was affordable. Nigerians felt the direct benefit of being an oil-rich nation. But behind this policy, a powerful cartel was forming. By the 1980s and 1990s, as Nigeria's refineries collapsed due to neglect, corruption, and mismanagement, the country could no longer refine enough petrol for itself. This gap gave rise to a powerful network of importers, politically connected businessmen who made billions importing fuel while the government footed the subsidy bill. And this was where the oil subsidy cartel was born. Instead of protecting Nigerians, the subsidy system became a cash cow for a few. Reports from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and even the international bodies revealed that ghost companies collected billions for fuel that was never delivered. In 2012, a government probe showed that of the 2.7 trillion naira paid in subsidy that year, over half went to fraudulent claims. By then, the subsidy was less about helping Nigerians and more about enriching a small elites in the cartel. Yet, the ordinary Nigerian was still struggling. Long queues at petrol stations, scarcity despite trillions of naira spent on subsidy, and a cycle of corruption that seemed unstoppable. Each attempt by past leaders to remove the subsidy ended in chaos. Jonathan tried in 2012 but backed down after nationwide protests in cities like Lagos and Abuja and other parts of the country. Muhammadu Buhari promised to remove it but maintained it for 8 years. The cartel was too powerful and Nigerians were too dependent on subsidy. Until May 29, 2023, when Bola Ahmed Tinubu uttered the words no Nigerian president had dared to utter, namely, subsidy is gone. By the time Bola Ahmed Tinubu walked into Aso Rock in May 2023, the numbers told a tragic story. Nigeria was bleeding cash, not from poverty alleviation or infrastructure projects, but from the endless pit called fuel subsidy payment. According to the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited (NNPCL), subsidy payments gulped 4.39 trillion naira in 2022 alone. To put that in perspective, it was almost as much as Nigeria's total federal budget for health and education combined. The International Monetary Fund had warned repeatedly that Nigeria was spending more on cheap petrol than on schools, hospitals, or fixing its collapsing power sector. In reality, the subsidy was a financial time bomb. The 2023 budget itself revealed the crisis that over 3.36 trillion naira was allocated to cover the subsidy just for the first half of the year. Without removal, projections suggested it could have reached 6 trillion naira annually, nearly 30% of federal revenue. But here is a real kicker. Ordinary Nigerians were not the biggest beneficiaries of the subsidy era. The World Bank in a 2022 report stated bluntly that fuel subsidies in Nigeria benefited the rich more than the poor. Why? Because the rich consume more petrol. They own multiple cars, businesses, and generators. Meanwhile, the poorest Nigerians who barely own motorcycles were simply subsidizing the wealthy elite through national debts. Even worse, subsidy payments were financed through borrowing. Nigeria's debt profile ballooned past 77 trillion naira by mid-2023, with interest payments eating up to over 90% of government revenue. In other words, the country was borrowing money to keep petrol cheap for the wealthy, while hospitals lacked oxygen tanks and classrooms were falling apart. And then there was the smuggling problem. Cheap Nigerian petrol was regularly smuggled into neighboring countries, Niger, Benin, and Cameroon, where it was sold at higher rates. Estimates from the NNPCL suggested that up to 30% of subsidized fuel never reached Nigerian pumps. The cartel thrived, foreign borders benefited, and Nigerians suffered endless petrol scarcity. This was the economic dead end that Bola Ahmed Tinubu inherited. The numbers were not just unsustainable, they were suicidal. Removing the subsidy was an unavoidable reality, not a mere political gamble. So, on that inauguration day when Bola Ahmed Tinubu declared subsidies gone, it wasn't mere rhetoric. It was a fiscal bullet fired directly into the heart of one of Nigeria's most entrenched rackets. On May 29, 2023, during his swearing-in ceremony, Bola Ahmed Tinubu dropped the bombshell. Subsidy is gone. No consultations, no gradual phase-out, no sugarcoating. And the shockwaves hit instantly. Within hours, filling stations across the country adjusted prices. Fuel jumped from 185 naira per litre to between 480 to 600 naira per litre. Transport fares doubled, food prices skyrocketed, and Nigerians felt the sting of the fuel subsidy removal. Critics called it reckless. Even allies admitted the announcement was, quote, too sudden. But Tinubu had done what his predecessors, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan and Muhammadu Buhari, for 8 years could not do. He pulled the plug without blinking. The immediate consequences were brutal. Inflation surged, climbed above 22% in June 2023, with food inflation hitting over 25%, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Workers' unions protested, threatening nationwide strikes. The middle class shrank further as household budgets collapsed. But here is where the story takes a twist. Tinubu's move exposed the deep rot in the system. NNPCL's books suddenly became clearer. For years, fuel imports were shrouded in secrecy. But without the subsidy, the real cost of petrol became transparent. Foreign exchange distortions were challenged. With the subsidy gone, the government could no longer hide behind fake exchange rates used in the subsidy racket. Investors took notice. Both the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund welcomed the bold step, calling it, quote, a necessary reform that could unlock Nigeria's economic potential if properly managed. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's gamble was to endure short-term pain for long-term stability. His administration argued that saving trillions from the subsidy would free up funds for infrastructure, healthcare, and education. The president promised wage awards, student loans, and public transport subsidies to cushion the poor. But on the streets, reality was different. Nigerians struggled daily with skyrocketing prices, and distrust of government spending made many question where the so-called savings would really go. But the real question was, had Tinubu saved Nigeria's economy, or had he plunged millions into deeper poverty? To grasp the significance of Tinubu's declaration that subsidy is gone, one must know the cartel that dominated Nigeria's fuel subsidy. For decades, a handful of importers and insiders in the oil business made billions through opaque subsidy claims. They imported fuel, often with inflated invoices, sometimes for fake deliveries, and the government paid them the difference between the landing cost and the regulated pump price. The House of Representatives 2012 probe revealed that subsidy payments ballooned from 261 billion naira in 2000 2006 to over 2.5 trillion naira by 2011. By 2012, Nigeria was spending over 4.39 trillion naira on the subsidy payment, almost as much as the entire federal budget for education and health combined. It was quite literally a cash cow for the elites. So the question is, who were the losers when Tinubu pulled the plug? Fuel importers suddenly cut off from their biggest cash stream. Politicians, many had stakes in the subsidy system through front companies. Middlemen who thrived on forex arbitrage using Nigeria's multiple exchange rates to inflate costs. But here is a kicker. While the cartel lost billions, Nigerians lost comfort. Prices tripled overnight. The poor bore the brunt, while the powerful found new ways to make money. For example, importers who once milked the subsidy shifted their attention to forex speculation or positioned themselves to benefit from the Dangote refinery's dominance. Because many people argued Tinubu broke the cartel to replace it with another, creating space for local refineries and powerful players like Aliko Dangote, others said it was a rare moment where a Nigerian president showed political courage that his predecessors lacked. When Tinubu ended the subsidy, many Nigerians turned their eyes to one man, Aliko Dangote. After all, he was Africa's richest man with his $20 billion, 650,000 barrels per day refinery sitting in Lagos State, Nigeria, touted as the game changer that would finally free Nigeria from the embarrassment of importing petrol despite being Africa's biggest oil producer. But did he? At first, no. The refinery faced delays, technical adjustments, and licensing battles. It started producing diesel and aviation fuel in 2024, but petrol, the lifeblood of Nigeria's economy, did not immediately roll out. Meanwhile, Nigeria continued importing fuel and the pump price kept climbing. Critics began to wonder if the subsidy removal was just meant to pave the way for Dangote. Here is why they ask. Dangote enjoys near monopoly status in sugar and cement. Now, with the subsidy gone, the refinery could dominate fuel. Nigeria's 4 state-owned refineries are dead. They haven't refined a drop of petrol in years despite guzzling over $25 billion in so-called turnaround maintenance. With no competition, Dangote could eventually set the terms of fuel pricing, just like with cement, where prices mysteriously remain high despite falling global costs. Still, the Dangote refinery does promise long-term relief. If it runs at full capacity, it could meet Nigeria's entire fuel demand and even export. That means saving billions in forex that used to go into imports. But Nigerians are wary. They have seen monopolies before. They know that when a single man controls the tap, the water doesn't always flow cheap. So is Dangote a savior or just the new face of the cartel? That is the question Tinubu's subsidy gamble has forced the nation to confront. Tinubu's subsidy is gone moment might have sounded like bold reform to the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and international investors, but to the average Nigerian, it felt like economic warfare. Within weeks, transport fares doubled, then tripled. A bus ride from Ibadan to Lagos that cost 2,500 naira suddenly climbed to 5,500. Market women groaned as the cost of moving goods skyrocketed and those extra costs landed straight on the customer's plates. The National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) reported that by late 2023, inflation had hit 28.92%, the highest in 2 decades, and food inflation alone was 33.9%. Rice, beans, tomatoes, everything was suddenly priced beyond the reach of the average Nigerian. Protests flared, labor unions threatened strikes, and ordinary Nigerians felt betrayed. For years, they had heard that the subsidy regime was enriching a cabal. Now that it is gone, they expected some relief. Instead, the pain keeps coming. Even politically, Tinubu's move was risky. He was barely sworn in when he pulled the trigger, and critics accused him of insensitivity. Some said he wanted to look tough for international backers. Others argued that while subsidy removal was inevitable, the government failed to cushion the blow with policies like public transport schemes, wage adjustments, or food support. But here is the irony. The subsidy removal did free billions of naira. In fact, the government saved 1.45 trillion naira within just 3 months, according to the Finance Ministry. Yet, for most Nigerians, those savings were invisible. Instead, they saw only the suffering. The political fallout was clear. Tinubu's approval ratings plunged. Analysts warned that if the economic pain persisted, his government could face a legitimacy crisis. And let's not forget NNPC Limited. Though it rebranded as a commercial entity, its tentacles remain strong. NNPC still imports fuel and sets ex-depot prices, meaning it continues to shape the market in ways that keep competition stifled. So did Tinubu break the cartel? Maybe not. He dismantled the old subsidy cartel, yes, but in doing so, he may have paved the way for a new and even more centralized one. Subsidy may have gone, but how about the politics of oil? It is even more dangerous today. It is hoped that refined petroleum products would be made available to citizens of Nigeria at prices that are affordable, and it is also hoped that the prices of goods in the market would be affordable for the ordinary Nigerian citizen to enable the citizens enjoy the true benefit of being citizens of an oil-rich country. Many thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video. I am your friend and host Ekeminudim, wishing you the best of time in all you do.